Welcome to the AXPONA Audio Insider Podcast. My name is Lenny Florentine, and today I'm here with Justin from Ampsandsound. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This is exciting. I love talking about tube amps, and that seems to be exactly what you guys do. And I'm not super familiar with the brand, but before I learn about that, I need to know a little bit about you. It's the first time we met. So, how did you get into hi-fi?
I couldn't afford really good hi-fi, and so, which my parents had a wonderful room that had great acoustics. I think that they had a fairly, mediocre system, but the room was amazing. And then we had friends that had really amazing systems. But, so I knew what I wanted to hear from an early age. And then after college and whatnot, tried to build my own stereo system. Couldn't afford what I was used to hearing, which was like Magnepans. Magnepans need big power, and that wasn't going to be possible on my budget. And so started getting into the idea of horn-loaded speakers and single-ended amps and building my own equipment, and learned to build it, break it, build it until it stopped being broken. And that's what started me down the path of Ampsandsound and turning from a hobby into a company.
So how long has the company been around?
I think formally the company's been around 12 years or so. I've been building audio equipment for 20.
Okay.
So,
no, that's...
and the nameplate Ampsandsound has been around for 12 years. But before that, it was just under my own name and, smaller projects, less formalized.
Sure.
Once the company came to be, it was a more formalized, rigid product line.
Yeah, just something easy that people can see how everything's laid out, and I can't wait to get into that too because I'm learning about it, myself. And you guys are out of California. Do you build everything out there?
We do. So most of the equipment is actually built and sourced in Southern California. So like our transformers are made in California, our metalwork is made in California, and then all of our labor is here in California.
I think it's so interesting. I've talked to a couple other tube companies, and they seem to, do that kind of thing. And I think that's important to build the stuff where you're at, whether, it's there or anywhere else, to locally source things. I think, that's great. It's probably easier for production and probably makes a better quality product.
I think that most companies are small, whether like in the grand scheme of manufacturing companies. Audio companies are small to tiny, and having close working relationships with your suppliers matters because you have to be able to be pretty nimble. Your order quantity set is smaller than one would normally expect, and so you can go to smaller manufacturers that still want your business and will build a long-term relationship. Like my transformer winder I've used for 20 years. My metal shop is going on like 7 years now. Wood shop's almost 20 years.
So why tubes?
They sound better. They're less precise. They are more humane, and they sound better. And in a world where so much of the things that we use, we could never reproduce as an individual, tubes remain this understandable touch point as to what sound can be produced by tubes, and speakers allow us to understand things, where solid state electronics and the infinite complexity of our phone is beyond our single person understanding. And it sounds better.
Now, for somebody that's never listened to tubes, which I'm not sure how many people out here haven't listened to tubes, maybe they've never owned a tube amp.
Mm-hmm.
What does that sound like compared to a solid state?
Sure. And then I can even give you a good camera analogy because I've become sort of a camera nut. Tubes offer a version of the representation that seems more humane and lifelike. So, though, if we were to measure it, it's going to look less accurate. There's a truth to that. But when you were to hear it, your psychoacoustics, how you perceive the sound, it will sound more like a natural reproduction. So like I generally use this term like tremolo, the authenticity of the raspiness of the voice as the vocal cords are vibrating to produce sound. That is something that tube amps do really well in general, and so that it seems more human. Solid state amps can do digital sounds really exceptionally well. They're super fast, and there's purpose for those choices too. But if you're trying to have something sound like a human produced it live, it's going to be a tube amp that does it best.
Now, I want to get into like the different product lines that you have and stuff, but for Ampsandsound, what differentiates you guys from maybe some other tube amp companies that are out there?
Sure. So I think that the two biggest is that on our higher end product tiers that come in like metal chassis like this.
Like that awesome looking orange one behind you that I was like, dude, that's pretty cool.
I got a thing for color.
I agree.
They're hand wired, so they're done on turret boards. Turret boards, I could maybe go show you one in a minute, Lenny. But turret boards are an older way of building circuits, and instead of being if you think like point to point can look like block print, like you'd get a citation from a peace officer, and point to point can look like cursive, like some of long calligraphy. That things interconnect, or that they're rigidly mounted. Circuit boards provide a formal layout with traces that connect all of those components together via an integrated component to the circuit board. Turret boards rigidly mount something, but then we wire the connections ourselves. It is perhaps the most rebuildable, most enduring way of wiring an amplifier. It's also really, really labor intensive. So
yeah, I mean anything that's just hand built.
Yes, tremendously. But this is a significant, probably 5 times more labor intensive way of building it. The upside of that, though, is that a tube amp is almost an infinitely rebuildable product, as long as you don't blow up a transformer. The typical way of blowing up a transformer used to be that you'd get drunk, pour your drink as it was hot with the tubes onto the device, and something bad would happen. If you don't do that, these products can last almost 100 years with very little component replacement. Making it so those components can be replaced really easily makes them infinitely rebuildable, infinitely durable. Think of it like a 50s and 60s hot rod. Setting that up from the start is labor intensive and what we do best. The second thing that we do really, really well is we have very special transformers. So I'm super, super passionate about the transformers we use. I'm not the winder, but I own all of the IP against it. And it represents the legacy and the sound of our company.
So tell me a little bit more about the legacy and the way that your product sounds.
Well, so the legacy idea goes to this, that Ampsandsound was born of a hobby that outgrew the person, outgrew me. I have a profession in mental health that I work at, 50 hours a week doing, and Ampsandsound is another 30 hours a week to the company. We don't let things leave unless they're right. We don't really care if it took longer to build, if there was a mistake that gets done. It always leaves being our best work and always leaves being right. So we don't look at time. Our time management ideas are different. The legacy of the company is that we build an honest product that's meant to last at least 40 years. It has a lifetime transferable warranty, which means that, I'm 46. If I can have you serviced for the next 40 years, I will have done well by it. I've honored.
That is a wild warranty. That is unbelievable.
So if someone else touches it, it's not ours anymore. But if we touch it, we'll always service it.
So what is your most popular product?
So the two most popular products we have are probably our Mogwai SC, which is about a $4,000 headphone tube amp. Powers everything, does everything really well. It's kind of the hot rod. There's no fat on it. Comes in a wood chassis, aluminum top plate, big transformers. It can do speakers, it can do headphones, does everything pretty darn well. It's the 85% good answer. Our most popular product, though, is our Red October XLS, which is 104 pounds. And it's an integrated headphone speaker amp. Uses 300 Bs, and it's a monster. I'm looking at two of them off to the side of me right now.
I pulled one up as well. So this is interesting because, I haven't used, I've had a history of using tube amps and more vintage ones and stuff like that. But lately I've been hearing a lot about the 300 Bs and that people really enjoy these 300 Bs, but I don't particularly know what is so special about them. What is that? What is so special about these 300 Bs that just everybody seems to love?
I think that it boils down to three main ideas. The longevity of the tube. They were designed to be put in like transatlantic telecommunication transmitter boxes. So they were dropped to the bottom of the seafloor to connect the transatlantic phone systems. And they had exceptionally long service lives. They were underrun as far as voltages, but these tubes just didn't die. They kept doing what they're supposed to do. So I think that people look at that and associate the value of the design, that it was a really well thought out tube that did exactly what it was supposed to do and over delivered. The second big idea is legacy, which would be that Western Electric used them. And I am more of a fan of 60s hi-fi, which has sort of a mid-range bump to it, a little bit more mid-range centric. Whereas Western Electric, we call it, let's say 30s through 50s hi-fi, was much more transparent and even keel on frequency reproduction, probably because they didn't know how to build good bass cabinets that went lower yet. That's just my own hypothesis. That all being said, Western Electric provides a lot of legacy too. It was used in big theater amplifiers. It was used widely by Western Electric. It's really sought after. It's a transparent sound, likely because it doesn't have the mid-range hump to it the way 60s hi-fi tuning would have offered. So people like the idea of transparency and fidelity. Japanese audio, purist audio as I call it, really championed that idea through the 80s, through the 2000s, of taking 300B amps and optimizing them for that purpose, picking up where Western Electric had started. And then the third is that the original company, Western Electric, is now building them again. And some of the very finest new tubes, new manufacturing is being built around the 300B. So I think that really helps people feel comfortable with the purchase because they know that they can get high quality choices, that they're not getting disposable tubes that are an afterthought.
So now, the 300Bs, that's probably not your entry level tube amp.
It
right?
is not.
Somebody trying tubes for the first time, that just frankly probably isn't where it's at. Which one of your amps is that entry level tube amp? So somebody trying tubes for the first time, or maybe even on a budget, right? But like somebody who's trying them for the first time probably is going to be on a budget for what they're going to spend because they don't know if they're going to like it. What would that product be?
Sure. Lenny, do you want to hold on a second? I'll actually go grab one and show you. If you don't
Sure.
mind. This is actually our Kenzie Integrated. So our Kenzie amp is our longest running product. The Integrated is a fun, what I think is the best touch point, entry level touch point for our house sound. So what you get with this is big American transformers, so far oversized beyond what they needed to be, it's ridiculous. This will surprise a lot of people, but this is a 1 watt amp.
Wow. So this is interesting because this is where like pairing and stuff comes in. And
100%.
like, you're not using this amp on power hungry speakers, but then,
Nope.
a lot of
But
horn loaded speakers, like you were talking about earlier, maybe like Clips, right? Clips Heritage speakers.
I think I can name 4 great choices. So, but let me just so our Kenzie headphone amp, which wouldn't have the speaker binding posts, but would have 2 headphone jacks, just like we have. Where are we? Maybe this is the Kenzie Integrated. So, this is the Kenzie Power Amp. I misspoke. That's the same platform. Where the Kenzie Power Amp, instead of speaker binding posts, like a normal Kenzie would have 2 headphone jacks in the back, and we'd have a volume pot here. That's $2,600. This version, as we see it, I think is like $3,000. It's our entry point. But what you're getting is really good transformers in a really, really well-known circuit. And these tubes right here are known as the Baby 300Bs. These go back to like 1945. You have a modern input tube, which is a JJ Yugoslavian tube, which is a 12AX7. Get this anywhere, right? And then you 2025 tube, 1945 tube. 1945 tube can be bought for about $17 each. Gives everybody sort of the warmth and texture that you'd want from a triode and a 300B all right here. Now for pairing, good pairing choices might include Klipsch Heresies, Klipsch Cornwalls, Klipsch Fortes, Zoo. Almost anything from Zoo would be a great choice. Anything from Omega would be a really good choice. Anything from Volti Audio would be a good choice. Because anything above 92 decibels would probably be a good choice. Because on 1 watt, you're getting 92 decibels of sound pressure. That's a lot. 96 decibels of sound pressure on 1 watt. That's a lot of sound.
It just kind of blows my mind, and I'm sure other people out there are like, because everybody's like, I need 100 watts, or I need whatever, because they just want all this power, and you don't really need that. But from the other end of things, 1 watt makes me kind of be like, what is this going to do?
Well, and I would agree that 1 watt isn't the right answer for everybody, not the right answer for every speaker. But 1 watt in a small office, like my office that I have here is like 12 feet by 12 feet. Even on generally inefficient bookshelf speakers, like say the KEF LS50, would be really loud in this room on 1 watt. Now, might you like the sonic presentation of the bass with more power? Maybe, but would you appreciate the mid-range vocal representation with this more? Probably. It's always system pairing.
Yeah, it is always system pairing.
But what you get with this is tonality. And so, if you're a guitar guy, do you buy a Fender that's tubed, like a Fender Tweed, or are you buying an orange solid state? Well, if you're a bass guy, you're probably buying an orange. And if you're
it's all
a lead
just
guitar, you're buying
sound. Yeah. Because they're both good. Both amps are good. Just depends where you're going for.
Yep. But so this represents sort of the idea of what Ampsandsound brings, which is handmade craftsmanship, tonality, and purpose or intent. It's not the right answer for everybody. For headphones, it's an easier answer. We power everything with our headphone
right.
amps. But with a speaker amp, this is a really specialized choice. But for a headphone amp, this is like every headphone amp. Every headphone you have could run this.
It's interesting because like I have a pair of La Scalas, and that's probably enough power to power the La Scalas. And
your La Scalas are 104 dB efficient.
Right? So like you can power it with 1 watt. It also makes people be like, wow, it kind of shows off what the speaker can do, but also shows off that you don't need a lot of power for it to sound good.
Well, like with La Scalas, one of the old staples on La Scalas was 45s, which is half of a 2A3 tube, right? Because people knew that they didn't need the power. At most, you needed 2 watts on a La Scala, and you could very easily get away with half a watt.
It's just crazy that a speaker that big can
Well, so
be powered from 1 watt, and I don't know that I don't personally know can ever remember the math of how that works, but
so power helps you bend physics. If you want big sound, small box, you need big power. So big sound, small box, big power. If you can get away with leaning on physics, you can go big cabinet, big sound, infinitesimally small power.
wow, okay, I get it now. So what product that you make means the most to you?
So I think that the Kenzie headphone amp, which is $2,600, still represents in my mind one of the greatest values we offer as a company, because though we make very expensive headphone amps at this point, like our flagships that weigh 104, 106 pounds, and are inaccessible to lots and lots of people, the Kenzie represents a defined, concerted purchase by somebody, but where they would get a really high value from doing so and have a really high pride of ownership. So though it is not my best performing nor best selling, I keep it because it represents the ethos of the company, which was to give an honest product that overperforms.
So now I'm not a headphone guy, so you'll have to excuse me on this, because I don't totally understand how all that works with the headphone amps. But so you have a 1 watt headphone amp, and then you have the Red October, which I guess is the flagship biggest headphone amp that you have. And how does that make a difference? Like, what is the difference in what you'll hear on a pair of headphones from the two different tube amps?
The Kenzie,
because I only understand speakers.
Sure. The Kenzie is still. I don't even want to break it down into power. What I kind of always lean on is our transformers get bigger because they get better. And the transformers in the Kenzie are, what would we call that? The size of an orange? These output transformers? About the size of an orange?
Yeah.
Okay. The output transformer on a Red October XL is almost half the size of this chassis.
It looks massive. I'm looking at it right now. It looks massive.
The output transformer on a Kenzie weighs about a pound, maybe a pound and a half. An output transformer on a Red October XL is like 30 pounds. Just different. And to that, the winding is more specialized. But what does that translate to headphones? So on the Kenzies are really, so what we do that's novel, how we approach headphones, which is novel compared to other brands, is that we wind secondary impedances, 4-ohm, 8-ohm, right, that we think of for speakers. We wind them specifically for the headphones. So a lot of planar headphones are 16 ohms. Grados are 32 ohms. ZMF and Sennheiser are 300 ohms. So, we wind, on the big amp, we have 5 impedance taps. On the Mogwai, we have 3, and on the Kenzie, we have 2. Right? But on the Kenzie, what we do is we do like 32 and 300. So like 32 is sort of the universal impedance for a lot of headphones. Like everything sounds good on 32. On a 300 ohm tap, it just sounds light, fast, percussive, big, right? So if you took a Kenzie and paired it with like an HD 800, you have peanut butter and jelly for sound. It's so good, so balanced and well paired together, it just works. The Kenzie at 1 watt is still capable of using planar headphones, which is sort of where all the modern engineering in headphones has been, right? But perhaps it's not enough power. Where the so the Kenzie is really a great choice for orthodynamic headphones, cone-based headphones. The Red October, on the other hand, is a specialist for everything. So it's quiet enough for the orthodynamics that are really efficient, the Focals of the world as an example, and yet you can take the most inefficient headphones like the mod houses, that or the abysses of the world that are really inefficient, and they sound magical on it. Now, sometimes there's unique pairings that you would have never thought worked well, and I'll show you an interesting unique pairing that one would never have thought. I did a show a year ago, and we did the Kenzie headphone amp, looks just like this, and the Abyss Joel. And that was an amazing pairing that I would never have thought would have worked right, and yet it did. And these are like F1 race cars, super fast, super precise, really dynamic. And the Kenzie is humanitizing. It's not syrupy, but it sounds real, it sounds humane, it sounds organic. When you pair the two together, you get this really nice balanced sound. And I think ultimately that's what people are trying to find, is something that doesn't cause listener fatigue, has wonderful detail, and is engaging, feels authentic.
And I could tell you from looking at the product assortment that you offer something that a lot of tube companies don't offer, and that is the gateway into tubes. Because starting at just $2,600 or whatever, going up to like 20 grand or whatever, but you have a lot of options all the way up. You have a lot of options, in under 10K, a lot of options under that, and a lot of companies don't do that. And that's really interesting because I'm asked all the time about what's a good tube amp under $5,000, and it's hard to find one that performs well, isn't just like a Chinese made in China chi-fi product. At that price point, it is very difficult. There's a few out there, but even those manufacturers that make those, it's maybe one. But you have several options, which, like, I was talking to a guy that called me the other day looking for a different amp, and he was asking about a tube amp, maybe $3,500 or something like that. And I'm like, there's not a ton out there. And this is like the perfect solution for somebody. He's buying tubes because he likes the look of it. Not everybody's like, I need the tube sound. It could just be, I just like the looks of the tubes on my TV cabinet, and I want to see that. And they don't want to spend $10,000. They want something that'll perform good and that looks nice. And that's kind of a thing. And I think, what you're doing, giving a lot of options and stuff, can really help out the industry, especially the tube portion of it, which seems to be a smaller portion. But it's because of that reason people don't know what to get. And they don't always want this, the chi-fi stuff. They want something, made in the U.S. is big, made in California, locally sourced. Like, all that stuff matters to a lot of people. And being able to hit those price points, get people into this hobby and getting into tubes I think it's a big deal. I got to commend you on that.
I really, really appreciate that. I tend to be a big tent believer, so I'm going to suggest 4 brands that aren't me, because I think that, there's enough room for all of us. Woo Audio, great choice for headphones. Zen for speakers, for 2-channel speaker amps, and Broke. I think that there's a lot of wonderful solid-state products, but when I think about products that are meant to be 10-year ownership products, if they're not tubes, the probability of you using them in 10 years is significantly lessened, in my opinion. And it doesn't have to be for me, but you should give great consideration to finding a sound that is enjoyable for long term.
No, I think that's amazing. And, I learned a lot about them. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
It's as exciting. Hopefully we solved a lot of people's problems, for that customer that I was talking to the other day, right? This solves a problem. Yep. And I think, I think the product's going to speak for itself, and I can't wait to hear this sometime, maybe at AXPONA, and it'll be really good. But I really appreciate you.
We've done 3 years of AXPONA in the speaker room. We're going to be in the headphone section this time. I'm really
Okay.
excited to be partnering in the headphone section.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of options. You know, a lot of younger guys, you know, are into headphones and doing a tube setup. They can't afford $20,000 headphone tube amps. Like that's not a thing, you know, and they're just getting exposed to the Amazon stuff. You know, so this is a great in between of getting to better quality components, and I think it's really cool what you guys are doing and what you're doing, and commend you on your 80-hour work week because you know I know how that is, and but you've done something good, and I do appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Can't wait to see you guys at AXPONA.
it'll be great. Go see him in the headphone room right when you get in there. It'll be a good time. But for the Audio Insider podcast from AXPONA, from Lenny Florentine and Justin from Ampsandsound, we will see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys.